Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to day 2 of the In-Cosmetics Global Virtual Conference. Thank you for tuning in this morning. There are 8 more to follow today, so if you haven't already registered for the other webinars, please do so by going onto the main website, incosmetics.com/global. So leading our first webinar is Andrew McDougall, who is Associate Director of Beauty and Personal Care at Mintel, and he'll be presenting an overview of his presentation, The Panorama of Humanity, What Does It Mean for the Beauty Industry, in which he will present in full at the main event. But before we begin, I'd like to add there won't be any time for Q&A, as this is just a teaser. But if you have any burning questions, do feel free to submit them through the chat feature, and also please leave feedback, as it will help improve our future webinars. So without further ado, I'll now pass you over to Andrew.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining me. My name, as was mentioned, is Andrew McDougall. I'm the Associate Director of Beauty and Personal Care at Mintel. For those of you who don't know Mintel, we're the world's leading market intelligence agency with expertise in what consumers want and why. We basically analyze consumer data, then deliver fresh insights to help businesses of all different kinds. And today, sort of the teaser that I wanted to give you for my presentation is on one of our 2030 trends, which is actually looking at the panorama of humanity. And what we mean by this is just looking basically a sort of a wide-angle lens at different consumers, what they expect in the beauty and personal care market, and how this changes the way they interact with brands and companies going forward. Basically, some people are driven a lot in their decisions by information, some people are driven by emotion, some people are driven by really a lot of scientific evidence, some people go down that all-natural route where they just trust their gut instinct all the time. So what we wanted to look at over the next 10 years, and looking at this panorama of humanity, if you like, was looking at how these different consumers are going to seek different information and want different things from their beauty and personal care brands. Also how this helps to build transparency and trust within the beauty and personal care industry, because ultimately a lot of mistrust is fueled by misunderstanding, which is happening on a daily basis. We live in the world right now of fake news, and this is definitely something that's still impacting the way consumers shop for things right now as well. So looking ahead then at what we will see today, what we expect is actually looking at our 2030 project that we've come together with. This was something that we put together with our whole team of global analysts, tapping into the expertise of analysts in the Americas, in Asia, and here in Europe as well, where I led the team. And from this, we were able to put together what we thought we'd see the world would look like in 10 years' time, and from that come together with this idea. We also utilized our new consumer data. We've got a new consumer data pack called Globalized data, which is actually utilizing 35 markets around the world, getting consumer data from those markets to get a much more holistic view of what's happening around the world. On top of that, we also carried out extensive research with external experts in the field of beauty, health, retail, and digital to ask them how they saw the world looking in 10 years' time, 2030. And from that, we could then match it with what we were seeing, again, to get a much more well-rounded and holistic view. And so that's really what formed the basis of our research for the 2030 trends, and that really landed us where we're at for the panorama of humanity trend. The reason that we did this, and the reason that we're looking so far out, is because the shifts in consumer behavior are so important to look at right now. What we're seeing is the relationship between brands and consumers has shifted dramatically, which puts the consumer really in the driver's seat. Consumers are now dictating what they want to see from brands and companies in the beauty space, and retailers as well also fall into this category. So really need to know how consumers want to receive certain information, particularly as we've seen this fourth industrial revolution, looking at how technology has really changed the way we interact with brands and purchase products. This really is important to look at going forward. The reason a 10-year perspective is critical is because we have to navigate sort of the cultural zeitgeist, if you like, of what it means, and create this roadmap of different stopping points that we can look at. It's very naive nowadays to think that consumer trends are just going to be linear. We're just going to have one position and get to the other. We now have to look at things in a much more holistic way, understand that there are going to be big shifts in consumer behavior, and then find a navigatable way to get through those trends. So for this, we've created sort of trend spectrums. So the panorama of humanity is what we call a trend spectrum. And basically this spectrum is a spectrum of behavior which allows consumers, but also companies as well, to fluctuate across that spectrum, driven by certain aspects such as information and emotion, helps those things support one another, because we understand that not everyone is going to fall within the same point on the spectrum. And also for companies and brands, they're not all going to fall in the same part of the spectrum either. You may not be an all-natural brand or an all-scientific brand. Most of us are going to be somewhere in the middle. So it's important to recognize that. For today, for this sort of teaser presentation as well, what we wanted to do then was really focus on what consumers want and why then. So we decided the key thing for us to look at here, and so the key teaser that I wanted to give you, was looking at what the future consumer is going to look like. What do they look like now, and what can we expect then to be playing in this space? What we see initially is that right now consumers are really taking health very seriously in a very holistic way. So we can see this from statistics around the world. We've picked out some here from Germany, which shows that a huge majority of German adults are concerned about their physical health. So they're really looking to do something to help with that. But also a big majority as well are also concerned with their mental health. So we're seeing how beauty and personal care brands can really tap into this now and provide products that can help with sort of the active beauty trends that we've seen over the years, but also look at products that can provide a much more holistic approach for consumers. We also see as well that people are concerned with how they look, and they're very concerned with aging, which again plays massively into the beauty space here. Again, looking at data this time from Spain, we see that a huge majority of Spanish consumers are really concerned about their appearance in particular. So they're going to want to be turning to their beauty products. Beauty has almost become that sort of social survival kit for people. And we see as well a huge majority are also concerned about aging. The majority of this, it goes up a lot more for older consumers, understandably. But we do begin to see that there are consumers in their 20s and 30s that are becoming more concerned about aging. So again, finding those sort of social survival methods and concepts to reach out to those consumers is going to be important now and in the future. We're also seeing a huge positive natural perception driving the market. We've seen this over the last couple of years, and we expect this to continue to grow over the next couple of years. Again, we can see a huge majority of consumers, this time in India, agreeing that products with natural ingredients are better for their skin. So we're not saying this is fact, but this is a consumer perception, that natural ingredient ultimately means safer, it ultimately means better for consumers. We've seen that this has driven trends such as the clean beauty trend, which is something I always sort of hesitate to mention because it really does divide the camp, particularly in the beauty space. But we do know that these kind of natural trends and moving on to these sort of free-from trends and the clean trends, it really appeals to consumers because they tell a simple message they believe for what they want from products. We will get onto that a little bit more, particularly in the main presentation that we'll present in a few months' time, looking at how clean in its way can actually add to confusion rather than clear up confusion going forward. But it's just really interesting to see how in the beauty and personal care space, natural is still having its day, and because of these simple perceptions that consumers have. More clarity and understanding is needed though, and we need to avoid this confusion, and this is going to change the way that the conversation around clean as well as natural is going to be going forward. We see, for example, the consumer data we have from France showing that 80% of beauty buyers actually agree that there should be a lot more education and a lot more clarity on the definition of what is a natural product. This goes a step further when we think about clean because, again, although there's no definition of natural holistically from a global point of view, again, you are someone to define where exactly clean is, and you get even more confusion. So there is this idea that although there's a real drive for transparency, this needs to be done in a proper way in the beauty industry. We need to find education. We need to find clarity on what is in certain products and what it means to be a certain type of product. So over the next 5 to 10 years, this conversation is going to have to change. We also see, though, that there is this concept that natural means healthy, particularly amongst those sort of younger millennials and older Gen Zs in the US. We see that almost 6 in 10 of them believe that natural, again, means healthy. So this is really this thing that is going to drive this going forward. It's going to drive the popularity of these types of cases. Ultimately, we need to find where that emotion that drives this natural trend and the information which can back up a lot of the claim and provide the clarity on what it means to be natural, what it means to be clean, these need to be aligned. Because right now they're not 100% there. We can see this from the consumer data, so we need to see these steps being taken going forward. In beauty as well, more transparency is also needed to build trust in general, as consumers are going to question claims. We see this in the UK. 6 in 10 consumers don't believe the claims beauty products make. For example, reducing wrinkles, but this goes for every single type of claim. So there is this idea that there is greater transparency needed. I feel like we've talked about this a lot over the last couple of years, but a new approach to transparency is definitely going to have to be needed in order to meet consumer demand. We see as well that consumers want to be sure exactly what is in the products they use. So they're doing research, they're sort of doing a lot of information drives online, on social media. We see this in China in a huge way, 85% of consumers doing that research about ingredients before actually purchasing their beauty products. So this is really important to consumers. Again, it's driving sort of some of these other trends that we've seen. It definitely drove sort of the free from trend. Again, this is where misinformation can sort of lead to misunderstanding and then mistrust. So there is this whole need to build all of that amongst consumers, because as we sit here right now, we're seeing these issues in place. There's definitely something we need to be looking at over the next 10 years. What we're seeing, though, in doing all this research and using all these online resources, sometimes data comes into things in a big way. But it's interesting to see how people are willing to share their data, particularly in the beauty space, if they're willing to get something for it in return. Some also don't mind sharing without benefit, particularly in beauty. This is potentially just more for personalization. But there really is a benefit to data use, again, as I say, in the beauty industry. We know there are concerns over security and safety of data, particularly from a global consumer sense. But as I said before, in beauty, we do tend to see that consumers are willing to give certain data points to brands or to retailers in order to personalize their experience or in order to get a discount applied, or if they see an added value to it, they would definitely look to do that. In Italy, for example, almost 6 in 10 beauty buyers are willing to share shopping data if they get something in return for doing it. But also a quarter of Italian beauty buyers are also willing to do it without that benefit. So as I say, when it comes to beauty, we do live in this space where our data is generally trusted. We know people want their data to be used efficiently. They want clarity and, again, transparency on how that data is going to be used. But ultimately, consumers are in control of that. And in the beauty space, we definitely see how that will help us going forward. Trust is building in a number of different ways as well, not just in the data, but we also see trust as well in labs, in science. A few years ago, this figure was a lot lower, but we are now beginning to see that products or ingredients that are created in laboratories by scientists are beginning to gather a lot more trust amongst consumer groups. So again, almost 8 in 10 Brazilian consumers say they trust products or ingredients created by scientists. So there's a slow shift away from something being all natural. I think the vegan trend has driven this idea of lab-grown or lab-created meats, for example, has really brought us around to this idea that actually biotechnology and fermentation processes can be sort of naturally inspired, but we're very much aware that these things are all created in laboratories. So again, this is really helping to drive this sort of trust element amongst consumers, and really does open up sort of the next 5 to 10 years for these types of lab-created products. Cost permitting, will be a lot more appealing for consumers. We already know that biotechnology has been used for years in certain cosmetic products. Things like hyaluronic acid has been a very successful biotech ingredient. And I know at the In-Cosmetics show there's a number of superb biotech companies on display, which have been touting the benefits for years and years and years again. But we are now beginning to see that the tide is turning. People are shifting their opinion on sort of lab-created and scientific products, and we're seeing this merge, this world of nature and science so well. Again, going on to that point, in Spain we see 3/4 of consumers would be willing to use products or ingredients created by scientists that are exactly the same as natural products. So biotechnology is really becoming a lot more commonplace. Alternatives to natural sourcing and consumption, etc., are going to need to be the way forward, particularly as we look to source natural ingredients. In beauty, we're not going to be the top priority for these natural ingredients that are being sourced. Food will obviously take that in the next 10 years. But it does mean that we need to find new ways to source these ingredients, and things like aeroponics and hydroponics, lab-created products are all going to be the way forward to look at that. So with this sort of becoming more commonplace and becoming more accepted by consumers, again, we can see how science can really begin to play almost this natural narrative and this much more sustainable narrative for beauty companies going forward. So what we're seeing then with the panorama of humanity, what this trend is all about, and what we will discuss further then in a few weeks' time. We'll look again at a lot of those consumer points. We'll look at who the consumer is. That's the important thing. But what we will see then is really look into this sort of push-pull between nature and technology. Science and nature have always worked well together. It's not a case of science v nature. It never has been. But it is this idea now that there has been this push-pull as to, do I position myself down the natural route, or do I go down the scientific evidence route? And it's important now to really see how that relationship is going to be important to support one another in the future. We're also going to see how natural beauty and clean beauty as well. We'll discuss in length about how that's going to have to evolve with growing skepticism around brand transparency, but also skepticism around natural and clean beauty as well. This idea that we are going to need to see more from these. The language is going to have to change, the way we market is going to have to change. So again, in the next 5 to 10 years, this is going to be a really important thing for brands and companies to look at. We're also going to see how consumers are looking to hack or modify or adapt to the future with lab-grown ingredients, looking to new approaches for aging, for example, but really looking at how lab-grown could potentially become the new organic. It's going to be the much more sustainable route to go down for companies in the future. So it is definitely something that we're going to have to see and have to look at in the beauty space. So what we're saying companies, brands, retailers, ingredient suppliers need to be doing about this is to convert the mistrust that we're seeing now into trust and create products that facilitate these evolving approaches, explaining very clearly what they're doing, how they're doing it, why they're doing it. And really, this really shows how the sustainability element or the climate change element can really help to build a narrative around these types of approaches and products. We also see now that companies need to be supporting consumer instinct, not just overloading them with too much information, but also understand that instinct plays a huge role in why consumers buy beauty products. So this is something that we have to look at in a big way. That's what we're saying for companies is that it need to help people to expand understanding of science, such as biotechnology or fermentation products, say why we're doing it, why it's more efficient, why this can make safer, more effective products, but also in a much more sustainable way. Ultimately, going back to the clean conversation, this is ultimately about the drive for safe, functional products. So we need to be explaining why we're doing what we're doing and doing it in a way that isn't using fear marketing, but rather just explaining and the understanding of what is going on. And finally, we need to facilitate the shifting conversation around aging. The conversation itself is moving from aging and anti-aging, if you like, to actually talking about experience and longevity. So this is definitely something, again, that brands and companies in general need to be looking at and look at this shifting conversation around aging. So thank you very much for joining me in that very short journey, looking at who the consumer is right now and who they will be in the next 5 to 10 years. In a couple of months' time, we will be looking further into that. As I say, we will be exploring sort of fermentation processes, sustainability, innovations. We'll look at biotechnology as well, just how all this is going to be important for this whole panorama of humanity and meeting that consumer demand. But thank you very much for listening to me. I'm Andrew McDougall. There's a lovely picture of me in case you're wondering what I look like if you haven't met me already. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions that we have. If there are any from the chat, I can answer them sort of off air if you like. But thank you very much for listening to me. Please stay safe and have a great day.